Good morning. Well, actually, formally afternoon now. Welcome to what is it? Actually, episode 28 and our anniversary of our Cisilion live broadcast. So, thank you all for joining. Yeah, we started these a year ago today, when we still thought that this COVID pandemic was going to last a couple of weeks. So, what just goes to show what did we know. Anyway, welcome. Thank you everybody for joining us. I'm joined today, as usual, by Iqbal. Javaid, our head of the modern workplace, and also our guest speaker today, Matt Drayton, who's a contact center sales specialist at Cisco. So, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. So, why this topic today? Why are we talking about contact centers? Well, I think it's probably an area that we've all probably had more than our fair share of experience with over the last 12 months. If we think about everything that has changed in the world that we know, since beginning of March last year, then we've all certainly been working differently. We've been shopping very differently. We've had long periods of times where shops have been open and closed. We've been exercising differently. We've been socializing differently. We've been chatting to our friends very differently. So everything we've done has gone through, probably the biggest forcible change than we could ever have imagined. And that's really led, I think, to the rise and fall of many of those areas that we've been working with. If we think about the way that we bank, we haven't been able to go into a bank for a long time. I think the days of seeing queues of people for banks is nearly gone. Maybe some of the elderly people aside that still feel we need to do those things. But the way that we interface with everyone has really, really changed. And I, for one, certainly have really evaluated the way that where I spend my money, I guess, really, based on the kind of levels of customer service and interaction that I have with those organizations. So, I've moved my bank this year purely because I wasn't prepared to sit on the phone for hours to try and do things that I would like to do online or would normally pop in. So I've moved banking. I've moved insurance companies for the same reasons, that I can never get hold of anybody. And I appreciate that, call centers have been struggling and things. But it's been a really interesting shift. And I think I personally spend a lot more time interfacing with some of the companies that I deal with on a daily basis through social media, through chat, through web bots, through all sorts of different means. And I think for many people I speak to and industries I speak to, they've seen a very similar shift. They've contact center workers have had to work from anywhere. There's been huge demands on their services and phone systems and websites and everything else. So I think it's a really interesting time now as we start going back to whatever this new normality is. We've been talking about the new normal for a long, long time. But we've seen a huge shift. I think we've seen a huge technological development in some of the technologies and the services and the competition that exists in this space, because everybody needs to really focus on that digital experience with their customer base. It's all about retaining those customers now, delivering the best possible customer service. We all know the industries and the companies out there that lead by example with customer service. Everyone will have a positive story, I imagine, around Dyson or Amazon. And actually, when we think about the way that other organizations are, whether that's in travel, retail, insurance, legal, whatever that is, the customer experience is absolutely the most important thing that drives revenue, that drives client protection and retention, new clients. There's fast response times, and of course net promoter scores. How people value them. And so we thought today it would be really useful to introduce Cisco and their brand new contact center, which we've been dying to tell everybody about, which I think formally launched a couple of weeks ago, if I'm correct. So we were going to give you a little bit of an overview as to really how we can transform a customer's digital journey with Cisco. We're then going to talk about some of the common questions and things that we certainly get asked as we work with customers on their collaboration and contact center experience. We've been working in that space for a long time, predominantly with Cisco. We've got some huge deployments of Cisco Contact Center traditionally on premises. And I think one of the things that's driven this conversation immensely is actually the value you can get by moving to cloud, and actually what cloud really gives you, other than hosting it somewhere else, to really drive this digital intelligence that we now need to embrace our customer experience. So that's kind of enough for me for now. I'm going to hand over to Matt. Matt, welcome. Please introduce yourself and tell us all about this phenomenal new contact center experience.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, and thanks for the invitation. It's much appreciated. Yeah, you know, I mean, it is a time of change for Cisco, and from an industry perspective, I would also suggest it's somewhat a time of transition. We're seeing somewhat a tsunami of requirement and expectation. You kind of hint to it already when you talk about customer service, customer experience, you know, the entire journey end to end. And it's ever so important for our customers at the moment to make sure that they're getting that right. A lot of customers aren't actually getting that right. So as well as obviously, let's say we're all customers, right? So as well as the bad experiences that we're having, we're also having some fantastic experiences. And then when we have, say, a not so optimal one, the question then arises, right? It's like, well, why isn't that working? How come I can do it here, but I can't do it there? So with that being said and done, in fact, only yesterday, we did a webinar ourselves where we spoke about the digital first contact center. And what we're seeing, as well as obviously the change in infrastructure, architecture, the change in, you know, employees that have a focus on it, be it a customer journey director, customer experience manager, we're also seeing that the customers themselves, you know, yes, voice is critical and important, but I don't know if you're guilty of this, Rob, but sometimes I just want to send an email. And I don't mind that it's going to take maybe half an hour, maybe even a day to respond. But sometimes I want to just have a web chat. Sometimes I can just send an SMS. Maybe I'm on a Facebook page for a retailer, and I just want to send a message right there in Facebook. And of course, the iterations of what that actual journey can be are very extensive. So it's very important to understand how many of those different channels, you know, the likes of Cisco and others, to be fair, can support in that scenario. But that being said and done, you mentioned the generational piece as well. I mean, every generation has different needs and requirements, and not only do they have those needs and requirements, those needs and requirements change as the technology changes. So, for example, I always used to think, you know, if I don't speak to someone, something's not going to get done, you know. But only recently did I purchase quite a significant, well, I purchased an exercise bike actually, and I purchased that using web chat. I've never done something like that before. I also am looking to sell property, and you know, normally it's like I speak to the solicitors. Well, no, just send them an email. They send me the forms, I filled it in, and it's that low touch, quick experience. And again, everyone's different, every generation is different. But for me, you know, the day to day is so busy at the moment, and there's so much, I mean, not just in terms of my work, but also my personal life, and balancing it all together, you know, just finding the time, like even 5 minutes between calls, or between dropping their kids off at school, or picking them up, or taking them to the next club, having dinner, putting them to bed, or whatever it is quite a luxury sometimes. So this is a completely changing landscape, and yes, Cisco especially, I'll talk about it in a little while, but with a lot of the acquisitional work we're doing at the moment, there's some really exciting stuff around the corner.
Excellent. I think, sorry, Rob.
No, I'll do it now.
Yeah, no, just to kind of follow up, you know, in terms of the experiences that we get to see now, you know, we've all had good and bad ones. I think we can certainly think of some really bad ones. But I think you made a good point there around, you know, being able to carry on with your life, and be able to engage as a consumer. You know, whether it comes to making a purchase on Amazon, how quick is that now, right? We know that it can happen very instantly. But at the same time, if there's a problem that you need to follow up on, you don't want to be spending hours on the phone. And that, to be frank, it still happens now. You know, I've had to spend hours with HMRC this year just to try and solve some issues that I've had with them, and they could not present a digital experience. The only thing they've got is voice biometrics as an example, which is good, but it still means I'm waiting for the next available agent to come and speak to me. And I think the longest time I'd spent was probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours on the phone. I mean, it seems senseless, right? With the technology that we know is available today, you'd expect a lot lot
Yeah,
that's the point. I think the expectation level is so much higher. That expectation level is so much higher now. I mean, to your point about, I spent, again, during the trying to work out what we did about holidays last year that had been booked and we couldn't go on and those kind of things. I remember spending nearly 3 hours on the phone to, I won't name them, to a holiday company, only to then have the call dropped. So not only had I gone through a gatekeeping process and the only way to deal with them was via the phone. At the same point, though, sometimes, as you say, you do want to use the phone. And, I was scrapping around actually just earlier this week trying to get hold of something. So I wanted to speak to them because everything was trying to drive me through their automated process and none of them were the right answer. And I couldn't find a phone number. I could not find a number. And I actually didn't mind sitting on the phone because I knew I had to speak to them and I'd gone through that kind of initial diagnosis. So I think the point you make, Matt, is it is about, voice is definitely important. And sometimes you do need to speak to somebody because that's how you explain something. So yeah, I totally echo all the pain. I'm sure all of you listening have had very similar stories that you can, you may want to tell us about.
Yeah, I mean, as a contact center sales specialist, part of my role is to understand where opportunity is as well. And I often put aside a little bit of time just to phone contact centers and find out how it works. And it's amazing. I think a lot of people have messages about, look, a lot of our employees are working from home. You might hear a dog or a pet in the background. Please, excuse if you hear background noise, etc., etc. But just to let you know, everything's still secure, everything's still protected, whatever you need to do can be handled. And I think that's a good message, especially with COVID. Of course, there are those that have just said, look, we're closing that down. Some of them you can't even reach, and it's crazy. And that's a big failure. I mean, I phoned a retail organization the other day and a clothing organization. And the first message was, look, we can talk to you, but we can't take orders over the phone. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And why is that, And, as a premium clothing brand, is that really the message that they want to give to the customers that want to buy, say, over the phone, for example? So, yeah, I mean, everyone's looking at how that journey can be manipulated. Everyone's struggling to a degree. But the good thing about, I suppose, Cisilion and Cisco and the partnership is we really get that and we see it all over the place. And, with those customers that we're having success with, being able to sort of, I shouldn't say cookie cutter, but let's just say replicate and help others understand, how they can also be successful in this space is it's quite rewarding, to be fair.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I guess this kind of leads us nicely onto, what is Cisco doing to address this point, right? The experience isn't quite as good as we'd like it to be, right? Cisco have been in this industry for a number of years. We've had a lot of success in helping many of our customers deploy the traditional on-premises Cisco solution, which is still valid and available. And, we're supporting those environments. But customers are now starting to look at how they can enhance that experience, that digital experience, the ability to integrate AI into your contact center. How can we make the contact center more efficient? And I think now is the time to really address this point. And with this new release, the all-new Webex Contact Center, I think we'd love to hear more about what that means for existing customers, potential new customers, and how have you used the recent acquisitions around and My Mobile, and I think it's Voice Cherry. It is. I always forget the name of the company. How those elements have been incorporated into this all new Webex contact center.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, earlier when you were talking about HMRC, it made me smile because there's what they say, 2 certain death and taxes. So if they're going to make you wait for 2 hours, they'll make you wait for 2 hours. It's not quite that they may be so concerned about. But look, at the end of the day, that's no excuse. I mean, that sort of thing needs to be understood and looked at, regardless of what service industry you're in. But with that being said and done, and to your point specifically around Cisco, Cisco have been in this space for a while now. I think the stats are that globally we have around 3.5 million agents out there day to day. That covers about 35,000 enterprise organizations across the globe. So in terms of the pedigree and what we see, integrating that into not just the contact center, but our voice capability and collaboration, etc., it's quite a compelling story. But the point is, nothing stands still. And what we're seeing industry-wide is somewhat consolidation. When I think about contact center as a service, especially when I think about Cisco as their contact center cloud platform, i.e., the new Cisco Webex contact center, I really think of it as a kind of foundational layer, but a powerful foundational layer which really provides a lot of native capability out of the box. So obviously it will always provide voice, but then certain digital channels, the ability for flexible integration of sort of what we call it iframes, like a web browser within a web browser, bringing contextual information in and all that kind of stuff. It's more than what it's ever been in the past. And, like anything, seeing is believing. So I really enjoy being able to bespokely put together demos for my customers, help them understand what the new looks like compared to where they are at today. But to your point about acquisitions, yes, the consolidation is key. So out of the box, brilliant. I wouldn't even want to say a percentage. It depends on the customer, but it does a lot, right, out of the box. On top of that, if you look at the next layer, we start to go into the workforce optimization and the workforce management piece. And of course, Cisco have, I believe, they've got Solution Plus partnerships out there with about 15 other vendors as well that do integration work. And of course, when you look at not just those integrations, but things like eGain or Salesforce and all that kind of stuff, that also, from a CRM perspective, is very powerful. So that's how I think about it, kind of on a foundation on the first layer. But then on a second layer, you start to look at the Cloud Cherry acquisition, and then finally the cherry on top of the cake, if you excuse the pun, with the IMI mobile piece. So Cloud Cherry is called Webex Experience Management. And I think, Rob, you mentioned it in your introduction that, with net promoter scores, with sentiment analysis, with the artificial intelligence integrations and all that kind of stuff, you really want to know how that's performing, and you want contextual understanding of where that's going. And what's really cool about the Webex Experience Management piece is that it's presented to you not in a CSV spreadsheet, it's presented to you in a graphical format in real time pretty much. So, one of the things I really like is the word cloud, where it captures all the words they're saying, it understands what's going on in the conversation, so it transcribes, if you like, the recorded session. And then it shows you a kind of word map and the bigger the words, the more it's being said. So if someone's saying, angry, or even sentiment analysis picks it up, it will let you know that 40% of your customers that are coming in with an angry posture, for example. So it's really powerful and it's really customizable. And then afterwards, when we send out the surveys and we get the net promoter score stuff, that all comes in. And again, it's all part of the new Cisco Webex Contact Center platform. Now, what I really love about IMI Mobile, and look, I'm interfacing with those guys every day, they're amazing, is they've built specific applications that embed themselves into the contact center, which solve specific use cases against different vertical markets. So, I mean, Rob, you mentioned a few finance ones. Let's take finance. If you go to their website and you go to the Solutions tab, go into banking, you can see all the different use cases they're solving, be that fraud detection, be that making a payment, be that, self-service, which is a big thing, right? Not even talking to an agent, just getting it done for you. And, with one of the integrations we have is with Google Dialogflow as well. And we see that being extremely customizable alongside the IMI application piece. So everything ties together, knits together. And as far as our customers are concerned, that's their Cisco contact center. And it really is, because IMI is Cisco, the Webex Experience Management is Cisco, we've got the workforce optimization and management piece under wrap. And of course, we've got the technology in the cloud that really provides that in a very powerful way.
And I think to add, I think one of the things I think that I just want to highlight, I think that is often forgotten about is a lot of the time, particularly when you think about the audio side of things, like where, you know, companies spend a lot of time investing in the IVR and the options that people are going to take, and how often are those really reviewed? And I think where the intelligence comes in as well is actually really understanding what, as you said before, what is it that people want to do? You know, what's the common trends when they come in via social, whether they come in via web chat, whether they come in through self-service, whether they call in, what is it they want to do, and how do you continually evolve that process to make it better? You know, we're all sat on the end of a phone waiting for the option that we want that might be number 9 or 10 or other, you know, and nested 3 or 4 levels down. I think that's the other thing when you look at how long you retain someone, particularly in for new business, right? Of how long someone stays in a queue, whether that's through a virtual agent, whether that's voice, whether that's through self-service, before they actually hang up and go somewhere else. Right? And I think it becomes as important as the website being the front door. The way that you interface and explore people is whether that's for support and service, complaints, or sales. Back to your point about great experience but can't buy anything. Well, yeah, great, thanks very much, but I can't spend my money with you. I'll go and spend it elsewhere.
And just to kind of expand that conversation, I think the customer experiences absolutely should be at the forefront of any organization building out a contact center. But on the same token, what I've seen since the pandemic is agent efficiencies, particularly, you know, since lots of agents have had to go back, you know, haven't been able to come back into the office, working from home, working remotely, has proved quite a challenge for those customers that haven't quite yet adopted cloud contact center. And one of the key things that I've seen organizations do is use this opportunity to make their contact center more efficient. And what that means is introducing more self-service options, right? We've talked about that, you know, whether it's through web chat, even doing smarter things with voice, right? Being able to use things like voice biometrics, which is speech authentication. We're working with the customer now to enable speech authentication on the go, for example, where, you know, you don't actually need to call in and say my voice is my password. It's able to actually pick up what you're asking for and automatically authenticate you. So by the time you reach a real person, that agent has full contextual information around who you are, what conversations you've had with voice bot, chat bot, via any of the digital channels that we've talked about, to really kind of speed up the process, not just for the customer, but actually save the time for the agent, right? So that's definitely been a big one, for big ask. For me, we're still working with lots of customers to try and build these efficiencies in. But that's where I really see the contact center going. You know, in the past, it's always been, okay, how many agents do we need? It's always been, you know, how many more agents do we need to be able to cope with, you know, more customers? But that conversation has flipped on its head now. How can we use the technology to drive more revenues, to be able to address more customers, but, you know, more importantly, trying to do that on a kind of digital scale. Just kind of moving on with the conversation, I think it's probably worth also talking about integrations, right? You know, one of the top questions I'm always asked by customers is, well, do you know what, the Cisco Webex contact center sounds great, but I'm using Microsoft Teams for my voice or my telephony, right? So surely I need something that integrates in with this platform. And whilst it's a valid question, what I always try and you know, push back on is, look, let's not focus on that first. The focus needs to be, as we've always said, you know, the customer experience. What are the challenges around your current contact center? Let's try and give you guys the best possible experience in that respect, and then we can focus on the rest of it. But again, it's a valid point, and I guess, Matt, you know, from Cisco's perspective, you guys provide the full stack when it comes to collaboration. You know, we know Cisco have been doing that historically, but let's be honest, not everybody has a Cisco platform on a telephony front. So what's your view on that? What's Cisco's stance on it? Do you really care whether a customer is using a different phone system?
Well, I think the first thing to note is that the CCAP platform from Cisco is called control agnostic. So that's the fact. So any call control platform will work against the Cisco contact center. If it's existing, then and it's just standalone, if you like, then just reaching that agent over the PSTN via like a callback function is how it works. If there's a need to provide a business case against a Splunk integration, be that from an on-prem or hosted perspective to our cloud, that's something we can accommodate. And we've also got a range of partners out there which are doing sort of cloud-to-cloud integrations as well. In my career, I've been selling Microsoft and Cisco for the past 20 years from a collaboration perspective as well as contact center. And in terms of the integration, what I see with Microsoft is that they typically allow people to integrate into their platform and do what they need to do. And just as with any other platform like Salesforce or anyone else, we have the ability to present contextual workflows and information into the Microsoft Teams collaboration client as well. So, and anyone could do this, any vendor could do it. It's not bespoke to Cisco. In fact, it's not bespoke to anyone because it's open from Microsoft. So from a perspective of tying in, maybe let's say via SIP trunking to like enterprise voice environment that's run on Microsoft Office 365, yeah, that's no problem. And then if there is a need to integrate work streams, contextual work streams, which makes sense, not just for the sake of it, right, but actually making something usable to the agent and creating a kind of ambassador within your business to make sure that they can deliver the customer service that they need. Yes, of course, we do that as well. And not just with Microsoft, with iframes and HTML5 and all the config. And the same with our platform. If people want to come into us, we support that in the same way. So, it's a nice way to be able to provide that flexibility.
I think to pick up on both those points as well, I think it's where we've seen, what I'd almost call the kind of myths, right, around the contact center we've traditionally, right, we've got lots of customers that we've deployed, huge Cisco collaboration solutions for, and then Cisco contact center that have always been very well integrated because that was kind of the only way to do it back in the day. And I think what's happened, as you alluded to it, Bao, is we get because everyone's living in these platforms now, these kind of collaboration and chat platforms, the myth is kind of, well, that's where everything lives, right? But actually, it shouldn't be about the interface, all about the interface. It should be around actually, what are we trying to do? What's in it for my customer? How do I make that experience? Back to that point about the experience. And actually, what is the work stream and the workflow that I need to map and get better? And then really where I present that information really should be a secondary. And I think it's about, almost sometimes, I guess, trying to put IT in its place, which is hard to say as an IT integrator as we are. But I think, the business case for what you're trying to do around the customer experience shouldn't be, well, can I get that message to pop into whatever the platform is? Now, ultimately, that is probably part of the buying decision. But ultimately, you need to be thinking about it as forget the technology. What works, what doesn't, what do you know? Do you, I mean, when we spoke yesterday, Matt, we were talking about that, what is your levels of customer satisfaction? Do you know? How do you really measure it? You may well think the stat you raise, you may well think it's 80% satisfaction, but it might be 8. Do you really know? Where are you losing your customers, at what base, at what churn rate? And I think this is the difference now in the levels of that technology that we've got at our fingertips.
Rob, just to interrupt you, I mean, not only is that important for the customer experience, it's also important for the business in terms of whatever sort of business, as you mentioned, the business case, the return on investment, and what that means for them. Because if they can't judge that or understand it, and they're paying millions of dollars a year for a contact center, they'll be like, oh, hold on a minute. Because like anything, some things are cheap, some things are expensive. You add on integrations and functionality and things cost more per user, per month, per license, per capability, or whatever it is. But if we can prove that value, and we can then ultimately see a churn in increased revenue with their existing customer bases, so our customers, if you like, and that satisfaction being proven, this is the new I mean, this is the ultimate place we want to get to, I suppose.
I had a question, and it's something that that just resonated from what you said there about from the business perspective, and actually how much money they spend, right, on these things, and why, right? So why do they invest that kind of money? Which then I think raises the question around, how many. And I'm interested in anyone listening, how often you really review when you do your renewal for your current contact center, every year or 3 years or whatever you do. What you use to justify that renewal, and if you decide that you're at a point where you do need to step it up, to change your customer model, how easy? And I guess Iqbal and Matt, I'm asking this question to you both. How easy is that migration, right? Because contact center is something that very traditionally has been embedded within an organization for a long time. There are workflows that are set around it, and so therefore I imagine the scare factor, right, of moving to a different platform could be, quite eye-opening for some organizations.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer that. I mean, for Cisco, from a commercial or licensing perspective, change is something. Well, I don't know if all customers agree with me, but we would make that as easy as possible as we go forward. However, when you're going from, say, a legacy on-prem contact center to the new Cisco Webex contact center, which is essentially a cloud service, it's a big uplift, it's a big commitment, it's a big change, because you're going from, old work streams, old workflows, old customer engagement styles potentially on older technology to the latest and greatest, where, the Christmas gift box has been opened, and like, how are we going to run that? So having the right vendor like Cisco, having the right partner, having the right professional services and expertise is really, really important. And, proof is in the pudding. With the work that I've done with you guys and the Cisilion team, the same mandate that our customers take to their customers, we take to them, right? I mean, there's a good book that I read recently, a guy called Mika Solomon. He's an American guy, and it's called When the Customer Wins, No One Loses. And I think we can take that throughout the whole chain, right? So that's what I kind of keep in the back of my mind. And yeah, I mean, things can be complex, but that complexity sits with Cisco and the partner in partnership with our customers.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, actually. That's exactly the conversations we're having. And the great thing is Cisco have made it simple, that transition from moving on-prem. In fact, even if you're with another vendor, for example, not just Cisco, there's incentives in place to help that transition to cloud more palatable. Whilst there is that sometimes considered an uplift, but I think that whole concept around building a business case, working out what the return on that investment is absolutely key. And the most important thing is the data is there, right? For us to be able to justify that spend and that investment, because now we're able to provide so many more features that they've never been able to. At the end of the day, we're trying to achieve an outcome for the customer to be able to improve their customer experience, and we know that we can deliver more of that now with Cloud Contact Center. So I'm really excited to see how this next year evolves. Excited to be selling the all-new Webex Contact Center. Really want to see how we can transform the way our customers provide the contact center services. I'm just conscious we're now come to the end of the session now, so really appreciate Matt you joining us for this session, Rob you as well, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Great, thanks for the invite.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.